best thing you can do is analyze your game. Analyze your game. So, your games are a free resource, right? Play tens of them a day. But how many of us actually go back and look at them, understand what went wrong, and are we doing it correctly? So today we will do a sample analysis and we will see how to correctly analyze your game. Okay, so this game we're going to go through is not one of my games, but it's a game I've only seen for a few seconds, so I haven't actually looked at it in depth, any depth whatsoever. And we are going to see what the correct way is to look at a game and to figure out where we can improve. We're going to look at it from the white side. Okay, so we'll start for d5. Okay, so far so good. So now white has a lot of choices, of course. White chooses c4, most natural. Queen's gambit. Okay, so now black has a bunch of choices. Black can play c6 or e6 or knight f6 or c6 or take or a variety of things. Okay, let's see what black plays. So black already plays this move queen d7. So obviously this move doesn't seem right. So why is this move not a good move? Well, it blocks in our bishop. It develops our queen, which is the piece we want to develop last. Develops it first. And that square isn't even really a particularly good square for the queen. So you guys might be thinking, well, this game is silly. This game actually was really interesting from the few seconds I saw it. So don't be fooled by the opening, but obviously this is not a good move. So the question is how best to punish it. How best to punish it. So what do you guys think white should play here? Well, I mean, we could just develop. We could bring our knights out. A move like knight to c3, move like knight to f3. Seem to make sense. It's not entirely clear where this bishop wants to be yet. And ideally, we'd like to play this move e4 in one move. So playing a move like e3, while it does defend this pawn, it is a little passive. It's possible we actually want to develop this bishop this way. So a take is also reasonable because we're exchanging a pawn on the wing for a pawn in the center, which is always good. Notice how after take and take, we get this central pawn majority. And now we're kind of ready to roll these pawns with knight c3 and e4 and take control of the center. And if we can control the center in the opening, it's usually a good thing. So this seems to make sense. So actually, let's see what happened in the game. So white took, which makes sense. Okay, black recaptured. And now, again, natural move would be to play this knight to c3, developing with the gain of time. So notice that if we play a move like knight f3 first, then if black plays e6 and then we play knight c3, potentially black can do something like bishop to b4. And now, whereas we're developing with the gain of time, now also black is developing with the gain of time because he's developing while simultaneously pinning our knight. So, like queen a4 doesn't quite work. Knight c6, queen takes, knight takes, knight takes. This is not good for white. So, the question is to play knight c3 first. Well, play knight c3 first. So knight c3 seems to be the correct move to force the queen to move, and then we gain time by forcing the queen to move to a worse square. So knight c3 was the move played. So far, white's been playing pretty well. No issues. Queen d7, again, not the right square for the queen. Queen should probably just go back to d8 if anything, and leave open the bishop. But this is not a good square. Okay, so now we should probably take control of the center with e4. No reason not to. I mean, you could also consider knight to f3. Reasonable. But e4 makes sense with knight f3 to follow. Okay, so e4. So I think white has a nice healthy advantage. Complete control of the center, a minor piece developed. Black, all he has is his queen developed. So we should make quick work of black. Black plays a6. Again, this move doesn't do anything to help his development. Bishop b5 wasn't really a threat, because black could always play something like c6. Another reason why queen d7 was bad, though, is that, there are potential tactics along that diagonal. But this is just a complete waste of time. Black needs to try to get his pieces out. Unfortunately, knight f6 probably runs into something like e5, although maybe knight d5 is okay. But somehow trying to stake a claim in the center with his pawns, something like e6 or maybe even c5, sacrifice a pawn just to trade queens or something, and try to break up white's center. But okay. So knight to f3 makes the most sense here, I would say. Just continue developing the king side, which is what white did. Okay, now black plays f6. Again, I'm not sure that you really need to stop knight e5 or knight g5. And this move looks really bad, because now your knight can't even get into the game on f6, which is its most natural square. You're not doing anything to support your development. So already here I would be thinking as white, okay, how can I win this game as quickly as possible? Because, I have the classical development. All my pieces are great, and black's pieces are terrible. Okay, so what are some possible moves for white here? I mean, up till now I think white's been playing pretty flawlessly. But okay, now we have to start to think. So we'd like to develop a bishop. So we can develop this guy, or we can develop this guy. So this guy can go here, here, or here. And this guy can go here, here, or here. Okay, so immediately I can rule out a move like bishop d2. It just, I mean, it develops a piece, but it's not really something we really want to do. I mean, it blocks the queen's defense of this pawn, and it's not really, better posted on d2 than on c1. Bishop e3 does make some sense. It defends this pawn. Bishop f4 also makes sense. It looks at this pawn. Bishop c4 makes a lot of sense, looking at this diagonal. Bishop d3 also makes some sense. Even though we're blocking our queen's access to this, we're opening up this. Notice now, this move f6 not only does it weaken e6, it also weakens g6. So potentially there are some ideas where we can at some point play e5, use that diagonal. And the move like bishop e2 is okay, but I think it's a little passive. I think we can put that bishop on a better square. Queen moves are also possible, although I'm not entirely sure what the best square for the queen is. Like queen e2 kind of blocks in the bishop. Queen d3, I'm not really sure it's really better posted on d3. Queen c2 is reasonable, but again, we might end up having to move the queen again at some later point, because it's not really threatening anything particularly on c2. And queen b3 is probably the most logical square. But I mean, with a6, I think black can play b5 anyway. I mean, I think this is a move black wants to play anyway. So it's not like queen b3 really does much stop that. Although maybe now we have something like a4, and now we're controlling this square. So maybe that's important. So queen b3 does make some sense, but and like another idea is like to play queen b3 with the idea of playing bishop c4 and just like trying to take this knight. The bishop c4 has like a dual threat of like taking the knight and playing bishop f7 check, something like that. So queen b3 actually makes a lot of sense to me, but okay. So yeah, h4 is also reasonable. I'm just not entirely sure that. I mean, I don't know that. Like what we're trying to do with h4. Like, are we just gonna play h5 and h6, or like I'd rather get some more pieces out first before I start kind of thrusting my pawns forward. But for such a relatively simple position, we're spending a lot of time thinking about what the best move is here. And I don't think there's like a great difference between the moves, but I'd like to play a move that's kind of active. So, so like bishop c4 seems to make the most sense, but you know, this b5 coming right away is a little annoying. And then we probably play bishop to d5, I guess. Because if we play bishop to b3, then like bishop b7, and now all of a sudden black's kind of getting his pieces out. But if we play bishop d5, now he has to either play knight c6 or c6. So probably knight c6. Now, is there any way we can exploit this pin? Not really. So we're probably just going to castle or something. And then he can play bishop b7. And again, I'm not entirely sure our bishop is well posted here, because you know he can play e6 and bishop b7 and castle, and maybe he's okay. Maybe he's okay. So maybe an idea is to kind of quick strike at this pawn, something like bishop f4, with the idea of just playing like rook c1 and like knight d5. And it's actually not clear how he defends that, because you know he never wants to play a move like c6 because it weakens this square too much. So I'm not exactly sure how he defends. You know, for example, he plays knight c6 here, and we play knight d5. This pawn is actually just dead. There's no way for him to defend it. You know, he has to play like e5 or something, and we just take, and this is hopeless for him too, because this type of stuff is coming. So, so actually, I kind of like bishop f4, just to control the e5 square. So I wonder if like on bishop c4 we can like take on g8 or something. Does this make any sense? I was trying to think of like we could do like knight e5 here. This is all kind of ridiculous.
Check.
And I was trying to trap the rook here, but it doesn't really work, because he can just play like rook 7 or something. So I don't think anything like forceful really works. But yeah, I kind of like bishop f4, bishop d3 maybe as well, just to kind of step out of the way of this b5 potentially. But okay, but I want to develop a piece and do something active. So let's see what I play. So I play bishop e2, which I mean it's okay, but I think this bishop could be better posted. Okay, so what? So black plays e6, finally trying to get his pieces out. Okay. I mean, I feel like we should be just winning, but there's nothing really clear here. Because if we play a move like bishop f4 now, maybe black can just play bishop d6. And now I'm not sure exactly what's going on. Like, okay, we can play e5, but then just bishop e7 or something, and I don't really know what we've gained. Like, ideally, we don't want to push these pawns forward because they create weaknesses. Like now that we've pushed e5, now black can use this square permanently for his pieces. So you know he can play like knight c6, b4, d5, and kind of blockade things. And we don't really want him to be able to blockade because we're trying to open the position up because we have a lead in development. And you know if we take, then all of a sudden this knight gets a free square, and even though this pawn is weak, now black can castle and potentially use this open f file. Or black can take back with the pawn even, maybe. Just try to control these squares. Not clear, really. Not clear. But okay. I mean that's a possibility. But in general, like when you're kind of ahead in development, you don't want to trade pieces, so you know we wouldn't want to necessarily take here, because okay, even after like take, for example, seems like the worst for black is over. You know he's gonna play knight e7 and castle, and okay, I mean we have a pleasant position, but I feel like we deserve more. So maybe a move like bishop e3. Just try to clear the way for this rook c1 and attack this pawn. Because really our main avenue for attack is going to be the c file, I think. At least for now. So that makes some sense. Maybe even d5. Maybe even d5. The idea of d5 is just to not allow a move like knight c6, maybe. And then if take, I think we would take back with the knight. With the idea that now maybe bishop f4 is good. This seems strong. But okay, let's see what happened in the game. Okay, so I castled, which is also perfectly reasonable. I think this is fine too. Okay, b5. So now Black's staking his claim out on the queen side. He still hasn't developed a single piece yet, though, which is a little bit concerning. Is a little bit concerning. Okay, so what can we do as white here? I mean, we could again maybe play d5. We could play d5 with the idea that if black plays b4, we could potentially play this move, d takes e6. And the point is, if he takes the knight, we take his queen. If he takes our queen, we actually recapture with the knight. So that we save our piece. And now after bishop takes e6, now I think the idea is we just pile on this pawn. We're in an endgame. I think black just has too many weaknesses and his king side is not developed enough, so I think we have a good advantage. So I know that I said that you generally don't want to trade pieces, but you know, don't be scared to go into an endgame if you can. You know, win a pawn or get your pieces so that they're much better than their counterparts. Because I mean, you know, piece activity is piece activity, whether it's in a middle game or an end game. So like, you know, bishop f4. If he plays bishop d6, we can just give him a weak pawn on d6 maybe. Play knight e3 to control this square. And then just pile up on this pawn. This is probably just a goner. If he moves this pawn, like say c5 or something. Well, now we play like knight e3. And now notice that this pawn is going to become a problem. Like if he develops this knight, then this rook is kind of stuck to this pawn. And our rooks are going to be using these open files. Whoops. Rook goes to c1. This rook goes to d1. So it seems strong, but okay. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is just to develop, again, just play a move like bishop e3, bishop f4. Notice that black might be starting to try to do something like bishop to b7 to attack this pawn. And then a move like b4 to chase this knight away. So we have to be a little careful of things like that. But again, I think we can always play a move like queen c2 on that pawn. And also, it puts pressure on the c pawn. Okay, so bishop e3 seems reasonable. Now bishop e7. Okay. So now, again, we have to ask what is black threatening. So we noticed already from the last move that this idea might be on the card. So Probably a move like queen c2 makes sense. I don't know about d5 now. Because maybe black can just take a bunch and be okay. So take... we have to take with the knight, I guess. If we take with the pawn, then I think b4 again. This pawn falls. So we take with a knight, then just take. And again, if we take with the pawn, then maybe just move like knight e7. Or maybe even just bishop d6. And then knight e7. And this pawn is actually a bit of a liability on d5. It does kind of stop this knight from developing, but... Nah, I mean, I guess this is still pretty good for white. I mean, this knight is going to hop into here, probably. So, yeah, this is probably still pretty good for white. Okay, but maybe we don't take. Maybe we just play knight e7 right away. And now we force this knight to move. I'm not so sure that I like this so much for white. So yeah, if you see one line in your analysis that looks good for you, don't just stop there and assume that play the last moves for black. Look at alternatives. So this seems to be slightly better. But okay, but yeah, we have to do something about this pawn. So I think queen c2 makes a lot of sense just to kind of go here. So now if queen c2 b4, we can play a move like knight a4, trying to get into c5. And our queen is actually going to be well posted on c5. I mean, eventually. We're not necessarily going to play this right away because, again, this e4 pawn would hang. But, we can play like rook c1 first. And then maybe even bishop d3. And kind of just, wait it out. Because black can't really do anything. I mean, he can't really even play knight e7 first because it blocks the bishop's view of c5. So, okay. So let's see what white played. Okay, so white played rook c1. And, okay, the problem is now this pawn is going to fall. So is this a huge problem or not? Didn't really want to give it up, but... Okay, so black plays b4, knight a4, and takes. Okay, so we got this great position, but now all of a sudden we're down a pawn. Again, black doesn't have any really kingside development, but a pawn is a pawn. And now this pawn's weak too. And now he can use this d5 home permanently for his pieces. So it seems that we've already messed up somewhere. And it was probably not noticing that we were potentially going to lose a pawn. You have to ask yourself in this position, what is black threatening? And if you notice that this is attacked once and only defended once, and that this can be chased away, then you'd realize, okay, well, I have to do something about that. So even a move like a3 is not, the worst in the world. It's okay, at least you're responding to the threat. Not the most active move, but it beats losing a pawn. Okay, so we lose a pawn. So now we have to kind of refocus and say, okay, well, we lost the pawn, but okay, I mean, we still have a lot of positives in our position. Our pieces are better, and black's a long way from castling. But the question is, what can we do? So what looks good here? What looks good here? Okay, I'd like to put more pressure on this guy. Question is how. Can't play queen c2 because of the bishop. If I play bishop f4, he'll probably play bishop d6. Okay, so what I'm looking at is like bishop f4, bishop d6, knight c5, which forks these. And I think forces bishop takes knight. Because the only way for this queen to save this bishop is queen c6, and then knight takes e6 I think just wins. Because you're threatening this, and this, and this. So I think bishop takes is forced. And then we play rook takes. So now the idea is we're hitting this. And really the only way for him to defend it is play c6, which looks really ugly. Looks really ugly. I'm not really sure how we can add more pressure though. This bishop is doing a good job of controlling the light square. Especially if it lands here. So maybe an idea... like... maybe just queen a4? Trying to hit this guy? And notice this knight's trapped. Notice that knight's trapped. So if we just play queen takes b4 and bishop takes b8, that looks pretty strong. So this actually seems good. This actually seems good. So this variation with bishop f4 seems good. Do you guys see anything else? I think some chats are getting cut off because I saw Zwish said, oh no, d4 hangs, but I didn't see the whole line. Or I didn't see what you were referring to. So you could maybe repeat what you said. Because like in my line, like he can never like, okay, so bishop d6, knight c5, take, d6, queen a4. He can never really do this. I think rook takes c6 is too strong. I think. Or at the very least, I can play bishop e3. I mean, this should just deadly. Or I mean, even like, yeah, bishop e3 and then just. Yeah, I mean, this should be too strong. But okay, I think bishop f4 makes sense. But do you guys see anything else that looks interesting? I mean, you could play knight c5 first, I guess. But I feel like you gain a tempo this way. Because, okay, bishop f4, bishop d6, knight c5, you're basically gaining a full tempo off of knight c5. Because basically this bishop is going here to here. So I think this bishop f4 is an important finesse. You guys see the difference? Because we play knight c5 right away, we basically don't get this bishop to f4. But I don't really see anything better for him. I mean, I guess he can't even play this move because now we have this fork. And there's no other way for him to defend this pawn, really. And he could play bishop c6, I suppose, but the problem with that is now his bishop is pinned. So, okay, he's threatening our knight, but okay, now we can play this, take, and now this bishop is pinned. And now we just threaten to play like queen c2 and rook f1. Okay. So anyway, that seems to be good. He plays knight c5 right away, which I thought was slightly inaccurate, but okay, I think it still makes sense. So take, right, and now we'll leave rook takes, because you want to keep this c file open to attack this pawn, and also you don't really want to trade queens being down a pawn. So rook takes makes sense. Okay. Played c6, okay. So now this move, queen a4, I like a lot. The idea is you're kind of hitting all the key points. You're hitting this guy, you're hitting this guy, you're hitting this guy. And it doesn't seem possible for him to defend b4. So for example, queen a4, a5, just, you know, take it. And this knight is still kind of stuck. This pawn's going to be lost. And we're actually going to be up a pawn. Now this rook's coming to c1, and our position is great. Yeah, I mean, and also queen a4 helps our rook get to c1, which I think is important. Because this rook wants to be on the c file for sure. So again, we're just trying to improve the position of our pieces. You know, unfortunately, we lost the pawn, but black's pieces aren't really doing too much. So we need to keep attacking them before he gets a chance to kind of finish his development. Okay, so white did play queen a4, so this looks good. Black played 97. Okay, so I mean, it seems natural to take this pawn. Is there something better? Probably not. I mean, the idea is when we take this pawn, not only are we winning a pawn back, but we're also making these pawns weak. Notice how many pawn islands black has now. Black has 3 pawn islands. This one, and then this. We also have 3 pawn islands, of course. This one, and this one. But our 3 pawn islands only result in 1 weak pawn. His 3 pawn islands result in 2 weak pawns, a6 and c6. So just from a pawn structure point of view, it makes sense to kind of split these pawns. But it also happens that we win a pawn. And we shouldn't be worried about a move like knight to d5. Because after queen a3, I think queen a3 is good to keep eye on this diagonal. We're not really worried about something like this, because it actually helps our pawn structure. This actually helps our pawn structure. And now these pawns aren't weak. And this pawn is still a big problem. So, you know, losing the 2 bishops isn't really a big deal. Okay. So knight d5 was played. Okay, so sorry, queen b4 was played. Knight d5. Okay, so now the question is where to retreat this queen. I kind of said queen a3 just off the top of my head. But maybe there's a better square. Maybe there's a better square. So what else seems to make sense? Yeah, I don't really like queen c4 because this bishop is going to eventually come to d5. So for example, if queen c4, you know, take that bishop. I mean, at some point, not necessarily right away, but and I'm not really sure this queen on c4 is doing something really. Like I kind of like a3 just because it kind of keeps an eye on this pawn, it keeps an eye on this square, keeps an eye on this square. Defends this pawn and also keeps an eye on this diagonal. So now if we ever move this rook away, we make it so that black can't castle. No other square on this file makes sense. I mean, I guess we go queen b3, but I don't know. I just feel like if a rook comes to b8 at some point, we might have to lose a tempo with our queen. So like the queen kind of gets tucked behind on a3. I kind of like it. I mean, maybe queen a5 is good too. Although I'm not really sure we're infiltrating on this diagonal. And I kind of like the option of being on this diagonal as well. Although from a5 we have the option of retreating back this way too. So a5 might be a reasonable choice as well. Okay, so let's see what white did. So I played queen d2. I don't like this move as much, just because, you know, like I mentioned before, if black's gonna take here, we're gonna recapture with a pawn in all likelihood, fixing our pawns. So we don't necessarily need this queen to defend this bishop on e3. Notice that like when I said queen a3, I didn't mention the fact that the queen was defending the bishop because it didn't really matter because I was gonna take back with a pawn, I think, in any case. But yeah, after queen d2, it doesn't seem like the queen has as much of a future as it does on a3. But I mean, it's reasonable enough, I suppose. But in some variations as well, notice that this knight actually wants to come to d2 because it wants to come here and then here and then here potentially. Because actually this knight on f3 isn't so great at the moment. It's kind of stuck guarding this pawn, and it doesn't really have any hopping squares because this pawn on f6 does a good job of controlling it. This knight actually probably needs to be somewhere else. And by putting our queen on d2, it also eliminates that possibility. So not only do you have to ask yourself when you move where that piece wants to go, but you also have to ask yourself where other pieces want to go. And you don't want your pieces, you don't want multiple pieces vying for the same square. That's actually really important. Because just because a square is best for one piece doesn't necessarily mean it should go there, because there's actually could be a more important piece that belongs in that square instead. Okay. By the way, notice what I'm not using during this entire analysis. What am I not using? I'm not using an engine. So, for all I know, all these moves I could be saying are completely terrible, right? But, I mean, what I'm saying does make sense, right? To you guys, everything I've said so far. But just because an engine doesn't confirm it doesn't mean that what I'm saying isn't right. So, an engine might prefer queen a5 or whatever to queen a3, because it likes the queen's mobility on that square, or whatever. But, I mean, queen a3 can't certainly be far off from being correct. But this is important because you guys need to learn how to be able to look at your games without having some engine tell you what the evaluation is. Because you don't learn nearly as much as you do by looking at it this way. Look how much stuff we've already looked at in only 15 moves. Like, I've been talking about this game for what? Over 45 minutes? We're only on move 15. And I'll give you a sneak peek. This game is over 60 moves. And there's actually a really, really interesting endgame that we have to look at. So this video could go on for a while. But I might speed through a little bit in the middle game. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it with an engine's eyes, what happens? Oh, you see engine gives you the best move, and you're like, oh yeah, of course, obviously that's the best move. Oh yeah, I knew that. I should put my queen here, But you're not really looking at what's going on in the position. So look how much we've been able to ascertain in just 15 moves in the position. White had great development. White had a perfect game. Through a tactic missed, he lost a pawn, but he's still actually doing quite well, and he managed to get his pawn back. So he has 2 bishops. He has better development. King is safe. But okay, I mean, it's still a game. There's nothing clear cut here. So this type of in-depth analysis is really something that'll help you improve your game, because maybe this is a blitz game, and maybe you just didn't have time to think about what you should have done, and you missed that tactic. But the difference between a move like queen d2 and queen a3 could be the difference between winning or losing your next game, just because you're able to develop your pieces better. So being able to kind of look at a game like this critically really helps you to see what's going on in your thought process and what's going wrong and what's going right. Because, I mean, for the first 15 moves, White did a lot right? I mean, he controlled the center. He took advantage of some of Black's odd moves. Really, the only thing you can say that White kind of did incorrectly so far was miss the tactic of losing a pawn. But okay. So anyway, enough philosophy. So queen d2, castle. Okay, so Black gets safe. Okay, so now, unfortunately, like I said, this knight kind of wants to be here, because we kind of want to drag this bishop away from this square, because this blockading square is really crucial. But okay, we have time to make a move like rook c1 now and kind of just put pressure on this, because what we really want to play against is this knight. This knight is terrible. But, if given some time, Black can maybe play a5 and knight a6 and knight c7 and then trade this knight off and get his knight here. Or maybe, move his queen and then play knight d7 and get his knight out. So we really have to figure out, okay, what's Black's defect in this position, and how can we, keep it a defect? And so this knight's a real issue. It can't really get out easily. And another thing is this knight is defending this pawn. So if we can keep putting pressure on this pawn on c6, we can make it a lot harder for this knight to move. But also notice that we can't exactly take on c6 immediately necessarily. Just for example, say like we play rook c1, he plays, I don't know, queen 7, play move like h3, just as a illustration. So knight d7. So notice how we can't necessarily really take here right away, because after knight takes e3, there's this tactic involved where we lose material. So I don't know if it's important that you necessarily notice this right away, but you know, you could kind of get the idea in your mind in this position that, okay, you know, if I play Rook FC1, I have 2 attackers, he only has 1 defender, you know, he has 2 defenders on the pawn. So if he loses the defender on the pawn, I can win the pawn. But you have to be careful because you can't necessarily take the pawn right away because of this tactic. So, you know, putting pressure on the pawn is not necessarily a bad idea, but just be careful that you realize that it's not necessarily something you're threatening to capture because of this little intermediate move that uncovers the bishop. Okay, so Rook FC1, which is what I thought White should play, just to get his rook active. Okay, Queen F7. Okay, so now he's getting ready to do that, like I said. And now notice how helpful this move Knight D2 would be, right? Because now he can drive this bishop off of this diagonal by force. So again, notice how his queen being on A3 would actually be beneficial. Okay, but I mean, you know, having to play Knight D7 and moving the rook back isn't necessarily the worst thing. But we have to be careful now because this rook actually is running a bit short on squares. So for example, you know, if we just play a move like H3, Knight D7. So notice again, we can't really take here because of knight takes. But if we go Rook C4, now maybe something like Knight to B6. Now where does this rook go? Can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. So we'd have to take. But now maybe a move like Knight takes E3, hitting this. So now we'd have to take on B6. And I'm not really sure that this is good for us. I'm not really sure this is good for us. I mean, we're technically up a pawn. Maybe this is weak, but, you know, this is weak too. Maybe Knight 7 B6 also is a potential possibility. Now this rook has no place great to go. You know, here we just repeat kind of. Here we just repeat kind of, maybe. He goes Rook B7, we can always go Rook here, chase it off. I mean, again, we're getting kind of a bit far afield, but notice that this rook doesn't really have too many great squares to go to. So we might actually have to go here. Of course, it's not bad. It's not bad. Let me go back to this position. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad to come here, of course, because we're attacking this guy. But just notice that this rook is running a little short on the c-file. But okay. Rook a5 is a good square, though. So the question is, what should we do now? So we have an idea to kind of pressure this pawn on a6. But, you know, we probably want to wait for this knight to move before we play Rook a5. Because if we play Rook a5 right now, we're not actually threatening anything, because this knight is kind of holding the fort. So what can we do that's a bit constructive? So, you know, again, ideally we'd like to get this queen to a3, so that we could, you know, play knight d2 and chase the bishop away. But if we play queen a5, the problem with queen a5 is now our rook doesn't have access to a5. So now knight d7 again with the same issues. Now our rook is kind of stuck because it doesn't have a5. So can our queen go someplace useful? Can our queen go someplace useful? Yeah, I mean, knight h4 is possible, but the problem is it's, you know, where is it going from h4? Where is it going from h4? Like, for example, I could just play g5 maybe. Knight f3. Not really sure that this is what you wanted to do. Okay, so queen d1. Yeah, queen d1 actually makes a lot of sense, to be honest. It looks weird, right? Like, okay, you're putting your queen on starting square. But actually, it's not ending up there. It's going to probably end up on a4. And on a4, what's it doing? Well, it's attacking this guy, and it's attacking this guy. And it also gives us a square for our knight on d2. So yeah, queen d1 actually makes a lot of sense. It's weird though, because it just looks like you're backing up. But I actually like the spirit behind queen d1. I actually like the spirit behind queen d1. Yeah, so I mean, like knight h4, g5, f3, sure. But I mean, notice that I don't. I mean, okay, if you take this, it's not really the end of the world for me. Because actually, these bishops are kind of useless in this position. Like, how are you breaking through here? How are you breaking through here? I mean, you're probably better, but I don't know. I mean, now at some point I can take this and try to attack this. Maybe I just play like rook a7, rook d7, rook d8, and just pile up on this guy. And at some point I play e5. This is not so clear. This is not so clear. So you have to be careful about being overpressing on a certain goal. Yes, it would be nice if we got this bishop off the board because it's kind of holding black's position together. But if you kind of go gung-ho over that goal, you could be, damaging your position. So I kind of like this move queen d1 because it doesn't really do much to harm our position, but it improves the position of our pieces. Because it gives the queen a better square and also gives the knight a better square. Because again, we don't really actually want to trade this knight for this bishop. We kind of just want to put this knight, on a5 or on b6 or on d6. This knight is actually our best piece. You have to be careful, Kotov. You have to be careful. This knight is actually our best piece. It's just not currently our best piece. So this knight is actually going to be after this guy. So yeah. I mean, this bishop is bad, and this bishop is actually not doing much. You would think this bishop is quite good. Yeah, 91 makes sense too. 91 makes sense too, but I like getting to c4 quickly. And from e1, we can't get to c4 quickly. So anyway, let's see what white played. So I played 91. Okay. So, reasonable. But I still prefer queen d1, I think. But I think this is a good move too. Okay, queen g6. Okay, so you have to be careful. You have to be careful. You have to notice what black is quasi-threatening. So if we move this knight, of course, black is going to checkmate us. But of course, black is not threatening anything currently. So of course we could play a move like bishop d3. We could play a move like bishop f3. There's no real danger, but the question is, what should we do? So we could also play f3. So we have to calculate if f3 works. The idea would be if f3, bishop f5, g4, winning the bishop, right? Or does it? Or does it? Because can black play h5? Play h3? Or maybe actually black plays like e5? Bishop a flight square? Because actually this is pinned. The king h1, now the bishop can get out. That's tricky. Doesn't seem like it wins the piece. Also on f3 we can actually take here. And then if take knight, we can play bishop d5. But of course, if take, we can actually take here. Now this knight seems not in great shape. It has to go to g4. I guess you could take on e4, but then bishop f3. Queen f4, knight d3, or maybe. Queen h6, rook h5, wins. Something like this? I don't know. Okay. But okay. So queen g6. Okay, so yeah, I mean bishop. I kind of like bishop d3. I think. So bishop f3 doesn't make sense, right? Because after take we have to take with the knight, and our knight doesn't want to be on f3, right? Because we just tried to avoid that. So if anything, bishop d3 makes more sense. Because now after take, now our knight is maybe coming into c5. And on c5 it's doing a nice job of attacking black's weaknesses. Yeah, so I like bishop d3. But as long as you don't play knight d3, we should be fine. Yeah, so I like bishop d3, personally. Okay, so he played f3. Okay, so we're getting some crazy stuff now. But I don't think this wins. Because again, if bishop f5, g4, again, I think we can just play a move like e5. Okay. And it seems like we're loosening our king side unnecessarily. Okay, let's see what black played though. Okay, black took on e3. Okay, so now we have to calculate. So obviously queen takes e3, bishop d5. So the real thing to calculate is what happens after takes. And now, okay, knight g4, this seems really strong for us. We just play a move like queen f4, hit the knight, or something like knight h6. And now bishop h5 actually traps the queen, doesn't it? Yeah, this traps the queen. So this looks really strong. Okay, so now the real question is, can black take this? Can black take this? So, okay, we're attacking the knight. We want to try to chase the queen away. So bishop f3, so the only square it can go to where it saves the knight is f4. e3, the only square it can go to where it saves the knight is h6. And then rook h5. Seems to win. Okay, so what do you guys think? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Do you guys think we should take on e4? Do you feel like we've calculated it sufficiently? Or do you feel like there's still more to calculate? There's an e5 in the first line, okay. Okay, so e5 where? So knight g4, queen f4, knight h6, bishop h5, e5, this? Okay, I mean... Okay, but I mean, at the very least, I have queen h4, right? And then queen g5, take. I mean, this is crushing, isn't it? or queen f3 here. I think queen h4 is actually stronger. Yeah, but I mean, this still seems crushing, right? Okay, so yeah, if take. No, but see, the problem is if de5, you can play queen h5. Yeah, de5, queen h5, I think. Yeah. Okay, but I mean, in any case, I think this is really strong. The real question is the other line? Does the other line work? I think. Because like, okay, even here, like you could play f5, right? I mean, and like, it's not dead, right? Because, I mean, take or something. But it just looks really bad. Just looks really bad. Um, but yeah, the real question is, does this line work? Like, are we just winning a piece by force here? But I think it works, right? Bishop f3, the queen has to defend this guy. It only has one square. g3. There's no tricks, right? Knight g2, I can just take knight. Or I mean, I can just take the queen, rather. Knight f1, I can just take the queen. You have to go queen h6 and then rook h5 seems good. I think this works. There's no shenanigans. Like knight f1 or something. Knight f1, I can just take. So this seems like it merits consideration. fe4. I think it's best. Because, okay, I think knight g4 is basically forced. And at the very least, like, bishop f3 seems strong. Bishop f3 seems really strong. Because now this knight's actually stuck, right? It can't go here because, again, bishop h5 just wins. Or wait, so maybe h3 just wins, actually. Maybe h3 just wins. Knight h6, okay, well then this is undefended. Okay, well, in any case, it seems really good. So yeah, I think fe4 is the move there, but it requires a lot of calculation. And queen takes e3 is kind of like the safe choice. So for some reason, you either didn't trust your calculation with f takes e4, or you saw something that you thought was a reason why it wasn't good. You can kind of bail out into queen takes e3. So it just kind of depends on how sure you are of your calculation and how far you calculated. So let's see if white, dared play the trickier move or if he just went for the safe move. So he went for the safe move. But I do think this move is better. We kind of analyze a few lines. And you know, after we completely finish analyzing it, you know, you can kind of you could go over this with the computer if you wanted to, and then really see which one is better. That's kind of like what a computer is helpful with. But you want to make sure you analyze it as best as you can yourself. And either, you know, say, okay, I'm confident enough that I would play f takes e4, or say, okay, you know, either for this reason, or you know, I don't think the position is that great after knight g4 that I'd rather play queen takes e3. But you kind of want to come to that conclusion yourself, and then let the computer verify whether you were correct or not. That's only afterwards. So okay, so now bishop d5 makes sense to kind of block everything else. Okay, so now the question is, what do we do here? Because we're not up a pawn, and all of a sudden his pawns are kind of hard to attack multiple times, because this bishop is really doing a good job of holding his position together. So what's our plan here? Or what should our plan be? Because black has a lot of weaknesses, but right now we can't really attack them. So what should we do? Okay, the first thing to notice is bishop d5 threatens this pawn. But is it actually a threat? Is it actually a threat? So say we do nothing, right? Say we play like h3. So can he actually take this? I feel like he can't, but I don't know, I could be wrong. Like, I feel like he can just play b3. Now the bishop is trapped. And we're threatening to win it. So he has to play like bishop to b1. And now, how do we win the bishop? Okay, well, we can start with queen takes e6. Check. Okay, now king here is forced. And now what? Is there anything concrete here? I mean, it looks like we're doing well. Looks like we're doing well, but do we have anything concrete here? Like, I like this knight is trapped. This knight is trapped. So does queen e7 win? Does queen e7 win? So I'm threatening this rook. And if rook e8, we play queen b7. Now this rook is trapped. So knight d7 is forced. Then we take on d7, he takes on e2. Now is this clear? Take on c6. Threaten rook c8. Huh. Okay, well, we're stopping mate. We're threatening rook c8. But can black just play h5 now? Seems so. This doesn't seem entirely clear, but it seems good. But it doesn't seem entirely clear. Okay, so let's go back. And again, notice we played like a nothing move. We played a nothing move. Okay, so let's say we play knight d3. Bishop takes a2. Then let's say we play knight f4. So where does the queen go? Can't go anywhere on this diagonal. So basically the best square is probably f7. With the idea that on b3 he can play e5. But that doesn't seem to work, right? b3. So we're threatening just to play rook a1. So if e5 take, and if take, then e6 wins, right? Because now this bishop is hacked, and if queen b7, rook b1 wins. Now pin. So after take, black would have to take. You know, this is hanging. Maybe this is actually fine. So can we do something better? We do something better. Let's go back again. So knight d3, take, knight f4, queen f7. Oh yeah, b3, e5, right, bishop c4, right. Yeah, no, you're right. So yeah, that doesn't work. So yeah, b3 seems to win. Yeah, b3 seems to win. Okay, what about queen e8? Queen e8, b3, 5. Well, this should be over. Just take, and take. Yeah, this should be over. Bishop c4 and rook a1 to follow. And where does the queen go? Queen d7, just rook e7. Yeah, this should be game. Okay, so I don't think we have to play I don't think we have to play b3 here, or a3 or whatever. Yeah, I think this pawn is taboo. You guys agree? So I think knight d3 makes sense. Because yeah, we want to get rid of this for sure. We want to get rid of that for sure. That these pawns are easier to attack. Okay. We play bishop c4, which also makes sense. Again, we want to trade off this bishop for that bishop. It makes sense. I don't mind that move. And also now we have ideas of, you know, attacking this or maybe even getting our knight into c5. So this makes sense. In knight d7, now we have this rook a5 idea. Kind of forced. We could quickly look at rook takes e6 or rook takes d5. Does that work? Does that work? So if pawn takes, queen here, check. Queen here. Okay, it doesn't quite work. Doesn't quite work. I was thinking maybe this works, but take. Check. Here maybe. Yeah, but it seems unnecessary. I think black can just play like this and defend. So yeah, rook a5 seems to make sense. Does take work right away? Because if take check, you can actually take with a knight. Maybe this is good? Maybe this is good? And so if the knight moves... Well, actually the knight's trapped. Yeah, actually the knight's trapped. So does this work? Can we just take? And the idea is if take, and if take, then we take, check. And then we take. So does that work? What do you guys think? Can we take here? Because if we can win 2 pieces and a pawn for the rook, like we're winning. So does bishop takes d5 work? What do you guys think? With all these pieces on light squares, I feel like some tactic should work. The question is, does it though? Yeah, it seems like it works. Can you guys find a refutation? The point is, if take, the knight's trapped. Can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. 2 attacks. Whoops, 2 attacks. Can't go here. And so no matter what black does, if black moves this rook anywhere, we're simply going to play rook takes knight. Simply going to play rook takes knight. So it seems like it works to me. So if rook c8, we just play rook takes knight. I mean, we could even start with, yeah, just rook takes knight, and then we're threatening queen takes pawn too. And then d5, d6, d7. Yeah, this seems really strong. Okay. So yeah, knight d7 was played. Okay, so rook a5. So I think bishop takes bishop just won. But again, that involves some calculation. So again, a little bit more attention to calculation, and maybe white finds that. Okay, so rook e8 makes sense. Playing this pawn. So now we're kind of loath to take and open up the e file. Okay, so what should we do now? So maybe a move like knight d3 here? Knight d3 to try to go, whoops, knight f4, maybe? What else can we do? I mean, we want to activate this guy. That should be our focus. Right, so can we take on a6? Can we take on a6? Okay, so if we take on c4, take on a8, take on a8, take on c4, take on a2. So take, 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 take.
Check.
Yeah, I guess this wins. Just rook c8's gonna win. Okay, so that wins. I can't really take all those pawns. Okay, so rook a6, I guess I have to go take, and e5. I don't know, is this as clear? This is clear? So I'm threatening something like this, maybe. Then I want to play like this, something like that. So, you know, say you play like a4 or something. Yeah, bishop d3, okay, I mean. Like queen f7 or something. Now I probably am legitimately threatening to take here. Like a4, take, knight e5, and all of a sudden, I don't know. I feel like black is doing okay, you know, for being down a pawn. Like this rook all of a sudden can come here and start putting pressure here. I feel like black's pieces are suddenly better than white's. Like this knight seems particularly poor. You can't even play knight c2 because I can play like bishop takes f3. And I have this fork. So, I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to take on a6 right away. I feel like this pawn's always going to be there to take. So I feel like I'd rather get my knight into a good position first. But yeah, I mean, you kind of just want to try to stifle counterplay at this point because your position is going to be better than black's. So I don't think you need to cash in right away. And a pawn. Okay, so let's see white. White play bishop d3. Okay, so again, I prefer to play knight d3 just to get this knight into the game. Because we actually want to eventually make this trade happen, right? Maybe not necessarily by initiating it, but you know, if black initiates it, we don't really have a problem because now we're attacking all his weak points. Okay, but bishop d3 was instead played. f5. Okay, well now more weaknesses. So I'm almost tempted just to play bishop c4 again, just to play knight d3, knight f4. Is there anything else that makes sense here? Or f5? Any other moves come out? e5? Is that a threat? Why is that a threat? Can't I just take it? Take or something? Rook defends it. Notice that if queen b1 I have actually queen b1 is strong there. So maybe on e5 maybe I just take on c. Yeah, queen b1 is strong. I thought I had rook c1, but you're right. But no, rook c1 doesn't work. You can take on b2. But yeah, can I just do this? This seems fine, right? My king is a little problematic, but it should be okay. Like your knight has a hard time finding a move. Rook here, I just play rook d5. This seems strong. But okay, so he played bishop d3, f5, and now I mean another idea is to play like knight c2, knight to b4 maybe. And just try to win this pawn. b4 is actually a good outpost for the knight as well. So this makes sense too. Okay. So he took on a6. Okay. The problem with this though is oh no, is e5 a problem? Like can I take and play e5? Is that an issue? Guess there's no threats really. No, I'm just a little worried about this king. There's always like if this knight moves and this queen moves, there's always bishop takes f3 ideas. So I kind of like keeping the pressure on this for at least a little bit longer. Okay, but okay. So he took. Okay, so here I thought b3 was really strong here. b3 with the idea of bishop c4. Seemed good. Okay, so now yeah, so now b3 makes a lot of sense to trap the bishop. Just try to win it with rook a1. So bishop b7. So this does win that pawn. But I mean, why wouldn't you just take it immediately? Right? Like why would you waste a move to attack it? Like, is knight b8 a problem? I don't know, is this an issue? I feel like you can just play like rook d6. Take, oops, take. Now bishop, I don't know, d5 or something. Now this knight comes into e5 and you just push this. So okay, maybe that's what white was worried about. But I mean, trading this knight for this bishop isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think trapping the bishop makes more sense because now like rook b8 just bishop c4 wins because this bishop is stuck and I'm threatening queen takes e6. And this looks really bad for black. But I think b3 was really strong. Okay, but he played bishop b7, and see, he ended up doing it anyway. So like, why not just play this right away? I don't know. Okay, because here, if you're worried about it, you should again probably play b3. Okay, so yeah, it gets a little complicated here, but okay, so take, bishop d5. Okay, so now where should this rook go? Well, I'd like to keep control of the c file. So how about... How about c7? I mean, it seems to make sense to put the rook on the 7th. Okay, but rook b8 attacks this pawn, and then knight d3 maybe? Then rook b3. Oh no, you can't go rook b3. You can't go rook b3 because of check and check.
Check.
That's cute. That's cute. Okay, so that's a cute little line. Okay, so yeah, if we can play knight d3 and then b4 coming, this makes a lot of sense. So yeah, c7 does seem natural. But I mean, I can also make a point for rook c5 as well. The point is now if this queen moves off this rook, you have like rook takes d5 ideas. And maybe you want to get this pawn to b5. Okay. But yeah, Rook C7 does seem the most natural because we're attacking this guy. And with Queen E5 ideas potentially. Or, you know, just like Knight D3, F4. Okay. So he played Rook C5. Okay, I think that's reasonable. Okay, Rook F8. I don't know about that. So now just Knight D3 makes a lot of sense. Just controlling these squares. And if F4... And if F4... Then... Can we take? Queen B1. Check. Rook C1. Queen B2. Knight D5. Take. Check. Here. And Rook C8. Does this win? Does this win? Does this win? Queen D4. Check. Oh, I guess Queen D4 is a problem. Okay, does this work? Does Rook C8 right away work? Does Rook C8 right away work? The point is take, check. Here, check. Okay, now I'm trying to win this pawn by force. So if here, check. Forcing here, check. And then I can take with check. So the best is probably to go here or something. And I can still take with check. Probably the best is to go check here. Check. And then go back. Oh no, but I can still take with check. So is there any way to avoid being able to take with check? Ah, okay, check. Maybe here. Oh, no, because I can still go here and take with check. So this actually might win. This Rook C8 might actually win. Because, okay, I mean, black has, you know, 2 checks maybe. Check. Check. And check. Check. Okay, now I can run this way. No more checks. So what do you guys think? Does Rook C8 win? Seems to. Check. Check. You can't go this way. Check. No matter where you go, I'm going to be able to win this with check, I think. Check. Check. Maybe here. And maybe here. And then check maybe. Now take. So now the question is there a draw here for black? So check. Check. No more check here. You can give a check here, but that's it. And this should be a win for white. Should be a win for white. So I'm threatening just to check it. And the pawn, all pawn endings are going to be 1. So I think knight takes f4 wins. I mean, all that was forced, right? I mean, what else are you going to do other than queen b1? Check. So rook c1, take, so take. Take back is forced, rook c8. I mean, I'm threatening queen e6. So maybe you can go queen b6? Yeah, but I feel like you still lose this somehow. Not sure how, but somehow. So
Check.
Take.
Check.
I guess there's no way. So yeah, if queen b1
Check.
and queen f5, then take.
Check.
King takes. Yeah, I guess that is tricky. Okay. So, what instead? What instead? Okay, well, let's not try to get to an endgame. What if we just go take here,
Check.
take here. Okay, now in this position, okay, how about the simple rook c7? How about the simple rook c7? Does this work? So I'm threatening knight takes e6. Suppose. And also maybe I'm threatening queen e5. This seems strong. I think. Also threatening knight h5 maybe. And I feel like this queen is just too out of play. There's no way to get this queen back into play. Like queen b6, for example, just queen e5. That's kind of over because I'm threatening this and this. Yeah, but the problem is queen b1, queen f5 doesn't work because queen b1, queen f5. Okay, now like what about maybe this is okay still. And maybe this is okay. No, it feels so close to being lost though. Feels so close to being. Because I think like even like rook endings are all lost. I think.
Check.
Like I think this rook ending is lost.
Check.
I mean, it must be.
Check.
Oh no, because I have to check. Okay, well anyway, this is kind of tricky. So yeah, maybe knight d3, maybe he should have even allowed that. Maybe queen f4 first is stronger. Maybe queen f4 first is stronger now. The idea of just knight d3, knight e5, and not allowing this possibility. Because where can this queen go, really? And also notice how this queen controls b8. So this seems like a good possibility. And if rook a8, just knight d3. And if rook a1, just
Check.
king f2. And white's fine. And white's threatening again this knight e5 idea. So yeah, I think queen f4 might have been a better try. But okay, so f4, queen e2. I guess knight f4, it's hard to win that. Okay, so queen f6. Okay, so now now the question is what pieces to trade, because we're up a pawn. We're up a pawn, but it's not immediately obvious what we should be trading. Should we be trading queens? Should we be trading minor pieces? Should we be trading rooks? All three? I feel like trading queens would help. Okay, he's starting queen takes. He's starting queen takes. The question is, do we go knight e5 or queen e5? Those are really the only two moves, I think. Yeah, so I think queen e5 makes more sense with the idea of going rook c7. So queen e5, knight e5 should be strong. The point is, if rook here, you can play b4. Because you can't take because of mate.
Checkmate.
So this pawn can get to b5. If that pawn gets to b5, then you can play knight d7, and so on and so forth. Okay, so he played knight e5, which also makes sense. But notice how this knight is now somewhat pinned. The knight is better than the bishop for sure. So I think you want to keep those on the board. A pawn ending is winning as well. So if you can trade everything, it's good. But the minor piece, the knight, is better. But notice how you're not really threatening knight d7 because of queen takes d4. This knight's kind of pinned. I think queen e5 was better. Is a queen f5 trying to get in here. But now just queen d3, I guess, offering another queen trade. Or queen c2. Queen c2 is also good. Because it gets on, it offers a trade of rooks potentially on c8. We might be able to checkmate depending on where this queen ends up. Because like queen c2, for example, if like queen, I don't know, say queen g5, we have like this. And then if take, that's just mate.
Check.
So that might be good. Okay, so let's see where white played. White did play queen c2. Okay. So now if take, if rook b8, we can play b4, is the point. Because again, if take, we have mate. And so he has to move his, oh, he can't even move his king because of knight d7. He has to play g6. But now we play rook b2, and now we just promote this pawn. So now this rook behind this pawn will mean victory, because this knight's better than this bishop. So if he plays rook b5, for example, well, we can actually just play h4, and then knight d3, and knight takes f4. So probably he has to play g5. So g5 instead. Now rook b2. Now rook b5 to blockade. h4. So now if take, just knight d3, knight takes f4. So probably h6. Take, king f2, king f8. Eventually we want to get a knight to, okay, maybe actually just g3 is sufficient. The point is we're threatening to take and play knight g6. So take, and now we're just starting to take this pawn. King g7, king g4, king f6. And now maybe knight d3. With the idea of going here, here, and here. Something like that. But yeah, this should be a win. Okay, so h5. Okay, so now he created a flight square for his king. But this should be a complete win, right? Now we take. If he takes, we win the bishop. So he has to take with the rook. Now rook c8.
Check.
Forcing king h7. So this is an important finesse. The point of it is to get the king as far away from as possible. But now this rook is also stuck. Notice how the rook can't go to f7. And the rook can't go to f8. Now just b4. Doesn't it just win? Rook is stuck. So now black does something. e5. Black does something. Whatever we take. Black does something. Play b6. Black does something. And now here we simply play rook d8. And now we're threatening to play this. So if black plays king h4 or whatever, we just take b7, and now rook f8, knight d7, rook somewhere, and queen. And this is an easy win. So the only other option is to block the check, but that's just an easy win too, because after
Check.
take, now we have knight g6 check.
Check.
And knight takes f4, and this is completely over. Completely over. So yeah. I mean, taking the queen seems to win instantly. Taking the queen seems to win instantly. Because we get the rook out of play. And we activate our rook simultaneously. So again, that just requires a little bit of calculation and some ability to plan. So now that we're in the end game, it's about planning. So once you realize that the rook on f5 doesn't really have a future, you can kind of just think about, okay, well, what do I want to do? Okay, I just want to play b4, b5, b6, b7, b8. Okay, so yeah, queen takes seems to win pretty easily. Let's see what white did. Okay, so he played knight g6, which doesn't seem best. Doesn't seem best. This game was a... I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure. Okay, so knight g6 is threatening knight e7, of course. But I feel like black can just play queen takes c2 and then rook b8. So queen takes c2 and rook f6. Okay, rook f6 seems to be incorrect. Oh, I guess this was hanging. So maybe knight g6 was good. Because the point is, if the rook moves, the point is now we can just take and take. Knight g6 was actually interesting. It was actually a good move. And if rook f7, then again, queen takes f5 just wins. Because now if rook takes f5, knight e7 wins. And if take, then take. So knight g6 is actually a good move. Actually a good move. Okay. Queen takes, rook f6. Okay. So it's similar to what we saw, but a little bit more complicated. Okay, so now the question is, does this endgame win for white? Does this endgame win for white? What do you guys think? Well, again, this is one of those positions where when you see a good move, look for a better one. Because notice, for example, after knight e7, king f7 loses. King f7 loses. Because rook c7 wins. Because we're threatening knight takes bishop check. And so king f8 is forced, and now again we just go b4, b5, b6, b7, b8. This rook is stuck. Rook f7 ever. We can take on d5. And if rook takes c7, knight takes c7. And if take, then just take.
Check.
This is a one king and pawn ending. So first of all, notice that. So notice that like after king f7, rook c7 is actually strongest. And even after king f8, rook c7 is strongest. Same idea. Same idea. So if king e8, we just take, and this is completely winning. And if rook f7 again, this capture is winning. So that's the first thing to notice. But the other thing to notice is that we can actually play this move rook to c8 check. And now if king to f7, now we actually have knight to e5 check. King e7 forced, rook c7, check. King f8 forced. This is actually mate.
Checkmate.
You don't want to hang this pawn. But if king f8, of course, what happens?
Check.
Well, so this actually just wins instantly. So king f7 again, knight e5, only one legal move.
Check.
And again, if here, rook takes pawn. If here, rook takes pawn. If here, mate. And if here, knight d7 fork.
Check.
So black has to play king h7. Black has to play king h7. And now what should we do? Well, now we can just directly transpose into what we saw before. Play knight e5. Trap the rook. And now just play b4, b5, b6, etc. Okay? So when you see a good idea, look for a better one. So it's entirely possible that that rook ending is winning, but why go into it when you have much stronger? So yeah, rook c8 just wins instantly. With the similar ideas as we saw before. Because again, this knight is better than this bishop, particularly on this e5 square. It's dominating on that square. So, you know, when you're up a pawn, there's usually an urge to try to simplify the position to make your pawn count, but you have to ask yourself, what's the relative value of the pieces? And right now, this rook is much better than this rook in terms of activity. And this knight on g6 is much better than this bishop on d5. So in terms of relative worth, your pieces are better than his pieces, so why should you want to trade? Now, of course, if you can simplify and simplify into an easy win, then by all means. But okay, I mean, is this, you know, simple? I don't know that this is simple. It doesn't seem simple because, for example, if rook c5, rook b2, or rook b6, take, this is actually very tough because where does this king go? Check, 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 check. And where does this king go? Your king runs this way.
Check.
And this might easily be a draw. Easily could be a draw. This pawn is very weak. I'm going to play g5 next. So you have to be very careful when you simplify into these endings, because, you know, rook endings are notoriously difficult. See, if it looks like you're winning maybe 2 pawns, be careful, because this king is actually kind of fenced in by this f4 pawn. So you know, if this king could run to g3, it would be a different story, but at the moment it can't. So, okay. Rook f6, again, rook c8 is probably the best.
Check.
But yeah, white went for this Endgame. Okay, so this is now a whole nother question happens. Okay, how should white try to win this endgame? So what should white do here? What should white's setup be? What should white's setup be? I do think white's still winning. I do think white's still winning. But how? Not as easy as it looks. At least I think so. I don't know. Yeah, trade rooks, but you can't. You can't. But the question is, where does this rook belong? Where does that rook belong? Where does the rook belong? Well, the rook belongs on a square where it's active as possible. So the rook belongs on a square where it can attack these pawns, potentially. According to the classical theory of rook endgames. You want your rooks to be active. So for example, like rook c5, rook d6, you know, your rook is active, his rook is passive. Okay, but it's not so clear because like I showed you before, rook c5, rook b6, and all of a sudden, tricky. Because okay, you don't want to play rook c2. And again, if you take and take, and if you take this with check, again, I have this idea. So for example, if you play rook e5, try to block. So the idea is like a check here, check you, block. Well, I don't actually check you. After rook e5, like king f6. The point is now I want to play rook d2, and rook takes d4. And this 3 versus 2 is difficult to win. So, question is, do we want a rook active? Yes, we do. But there's another theory behind these rook endings, which is that rooks belong behind passed pawns. And so where's the passed pawn? It's on b2. So how do we get a rook behind the passed pawn? Well, we get it to b1. Well, we actually can do something better. And so I think the easiest way to win this is simply to play b4. So it looks weird, actually, because our rook will be quite passive on b2. But the idea is that we're just going to force black's rook to also be passive. So for example, if black does nothing, you know, if black just tries to get his king active or whatever, we simply play b5. And now we're actually potentially threatening rook c6. Potentially. But okay, so say he plays king f5. Now if rook c6, he can take and play king e6. But now we just play rook b2. Now the point is we're threatening to play b6, b7, b8. So he has to play rook b6. And now notice how passive this rook is. How passive this rook on b2 is. Or on b6. So now our plan is simply to play king f1, king e1, king d2, king c3, king b4, king a5. And okay, so let's say we do that. So king f1, king here, king here, king here, 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 king here, king here, king here. Something like this. Well, now we switch and now we go rook here. Now we're threatening to do this and this and this. Now this rook is very passive. So now if rook here, for example, check. Now we go rook here, take, and take. Now we actually have 2 pawns, if you notice. Our king can come to c5. And this is easy. Okay, so right. So the correct idea here is to play b4. And so rook b4, rook b6, rook b2, rook b5 is probably a tougher defense. But again, we're just going to go king here, king here, king here, king here, king here, king here. And just push this pawn with the king's support. And eventually this rook will become passive. And then with the king defending this pawn, we can now use our rook to rove and attack these weak pawns. So again, like king f1, king g6, king e2, king f6, king e3, king e6, king here, here, king here, king here, king here. Okay, so now we're getting ready to do something like this. So, you know, if 5, for example, we go check. If here we go rook here, and this wins. Because again, now this rook is trapped. So he has to take, and now it doesn't matter which way we take. Either way is fine. Probably this way is actually better. And now king here, here, king here, king here, and we're just gonna eventually zoom along. Or something. h4, king d4. Now notice he can't take because we queen, so he has to go here. Now, I mean, anything wins, but this is simple. Just b5,
Check.
take, and pawn queens. So yeah, b4 is definitely the best, I think, with the idea of just getting this rook behind this pawn, forcing this rook to blockade it, and then we just march our king over. March our king. But we need this king's help, because otherwise, notice that if we just try to do something on the king side alone, we can't do anything because this rook is tied to the defense of this pawn. So our rook can never go anywhere because we're always hanging this pawn. So if we try to open it up on the king side, for example, let's say we try to play like king f, or sorry, yeah, so rook b2. Say we try to do like g3. Well, now black can play g5. Take king h3, king g5 here. And really, we can't make any progress really. Rook g2 check, just king h6, and now again we're losing this pawn, so we have to go back. And this is not really helping us. So it's better to leave these kingside pawns alone and march the king to the queen side. So white tries to be active, but again, he doesn't see far enough into this position. Because this looks strong, and if black has to play here, then yeah, this is just winning because b4, b5, etc. But after black plays rook b6, all of a sudden it's tricky because again, if we take check again, this is not easy because after king f6, even though we're down 2 pawns, this pawn on d4 is a goner, or this pawn on g2 is a goner. So we can hold this one by playing rook e4, but okay, after rook d2. Or sorry, king f5, or sorry, even like g5, king f1, rook d2. Now we're starting to give a perpetual, and okay, say like h, or say even I don't know, 3, say even g3. Oh no, you can't because of say h3. Okay, so now check here, and now here. Now here, and again, this is some sort of draw. Can't really lose this pawn. And you're kind of in Zugzwang. Your king can't move, your pawn can't move. I mean, you could play g3, I guess, but just king f5.
Check.
And again, I mean, your pawns are too weak, and your king is in bad shape. If h4, I can play here, win this pawn. If here, h5, now I can play here. Here. Again, not really making any progress. Now I can threaten to go check and go here and win that pawn. So, again, no progress really. Okay. So white realizes this and plays rook c2, but now all of a sudden black has a very active rook, and white's rook is passive. Now after rook b4, rook d2, okay, well now this is exactly what we didn't want. But okay, it's not the end of the world, because this king really has no way to get in. And so we can actually take our time and do something like this, and this, and then push the pawn. So we're actually still doing okay. But it's going to be a lot slower. So g5, get our king in, good. Okay, so this is not something I would really worry about. I would probably just continue getting the king over, because, I mean, helping to exchange pawns doesn't really help us at all. After take, for example, it's not really helping us. H3, king here. This is actually tricky, because his king is getting very deep. So I would probably just leave that alone. Maybe even play h3 here, just to force something to happen. Either take, and then h4 to lock it up. Or just let it sit there. Maybe h3 is not good. Don't want to ruin the pawn structure, but okay. So he took and played h3. But now the problem is, yeah, after king g4, now all of a sudden this king is very passive and this king is very active. And now all of a sudden this king is coming to take this pawn. Or to take this pawn. Because in this endgame, when black's down a pawn, black just wants to trade pawns. Because if he can get eventually 1 versus 0, he can get some sort of Philidor position and get a draw. So, you know, for example, if all these pawns are gone... Oops. Sorry. So if this pawn, this pawn, this pawn, this pawn are gone, it's you know, a fairly easy draw. Bring your king over to the side. Even if the rook is cutting it off, because you can always uncut it off. This pawn's not far enough advanced. So... King d3, f3. Okay, just continuing the process of trying to trade off. Okay, rook f2. I mean, doesn't really matter. You could take as well. Same difference.
Check.
Okay, now attacking this pawn, relatively best. Now this king's a little far afield. But after rook b5, how does white make progress? So king c3, but again, not really threatening anything. So king g3, b4, okay. So now white wants to go here and here. Okay, so king g4, rook e5. Okay, so now maybe... I think having the king on cutoff is more important than defending this pawn. So why not just like rook f1? The idea of just going king b3, king a4, and b5. Because I mean, I'm pretty sure white's still winning this. So I mean, what can black do? I mean, if black moves his king, we're just gonna play king b3, king a4, and b5, and just with our king promote the pawn. So black has to move his rook somewhere. So I guess rook b8, king b3. And so now if black moves the rook off of the b5, we'll just play b5 right away. So for example, if rook c8, just b5. If rook c4, we can actually just play b6. Because if rook takes, we can just play b7. Now the pawn's unstoppable. So... So he has to keep the rook on this file to avoid b5. So, okay, you know, he moves the king, king g5, whatever. Okay, so now the problem is if king a4, or supposedly the problem is if king a4, check. Or actually, sorry. So king a4, now probably rook c8, b5, rook c4, oops. Rook c4, king a5, and b6. But now this should be a fairly straightforward win. Rook d2. And probably the easiest simply to play. Have to be a little careful. Because some rook and pawn endings are drawn, but as long as the king is cut off, it should be fine. So you're gonna want to play just like b7. Then okay, here. Okay, so whatever. No matter what you do now, I'm just gonna play rook d1, rook takes d5. So okay, so the rook has to stay here, and the king can't really do anything. So okay, you can push whatever. Rook d1. Okay, if you go here, I can actually just take, and this ending is winning. But if I go like king a7, for example, it's a little trickier. Because okay, king f4. Now if queen take king e3, all of a sudden this is a draw because this king is too far away. But oh, actually, rook f8 is probably simplest. Actually, there's okay, d3, rook here, d2. I guess it's the same thing. because now king a7, king f4, queen,
check,
take king e3, same thing. Yeah, so it's the same thing. Okay, but anyway, I think keeping the rook on the file is more important than keeping the rook on the pawn, because you want to keep the king cut off. You want to keep the king cut off. But he played rook e5 because now the king can get closer. Now king f4, king b3. And now he takes this pawn, which I'm not sure is actually best. Because, I mean, that pawn's always going to be there, right? So after rook b7, why not just, like, play king a4? Because ideally what you want to do is you want to take the pawn with the king, right? So king a4, you just want to play b5, king b4, king c5, king d5. Something like that. But by taking with the rook, now you let the king get closer. Okay. But okay, I mean, this is still a win. This is still a win, because the king is actually in bad shape. So rook d6 is a good move, because actually this king is kind of cut off now. Probably best is king d3. Probably best is king d3. And then rook d5. And then if king e4, you play sorry. So actually, so here rook d8, I think. Sorry, you want to keep the rook as far away as possible, because now you just want to play this. So so okay, again king d3 to stop king c4, d5, king d4, d6, king d5, d7, king d6, and now king a4. Because now this pawn ending is lost because my king is in front. So for example, if take king b5, king a6 wins. Gotta just be careful about the stalemate. Etc. So yeah, but also, I mean, like, it's actually a simple win if you just cut the king off as well, and you know, just give up this pawn, just do a Lucina position, promote the pawn, because the king is cut off. But okay, so rook d6, rook h7, b5, good, just trying to promote. Okay, king b4, good.
Check.
King c5, best.
Check.
King b6, sure. And now just like king a6 and b6, b7. Okay, rook d8, sure. I mean, fine. Okay, rook e8, good to cut off the king. Okay, this is unnecessary. Now he should just be playing king c6 to just promote the pawn. So king c6, check.
Check.
King b7 here. b6. And, you know, he goes here or something. Rook wherever. Or, okay, rook e5 even. 5, probably best. Because now I can just build a bridge this way. So, okay, king f6. Okay, well, maybe rook here. Then just rook c5. Okay, rook here, just play here, take, b7. Not much you can do. Win. So that's pretty simple. So yeah, just rook e5, rook c5. But, you know, I mean, no reason not to play king c6 first. Okay, rook e5 is good. But now the problem is, like, this is hanging. So he should have just played king c7 first. Now king c5, king d6. Okay, now king c7 is probably simplest. Just threaten to play b6, b7, b8. Because, you know, it's too slow. 6. Take, just rook c5. And now nothing can do to stop b7. So you in here, 7.
Check.
Here, check. Here,
Check.
here. Then if rook c8, or rook d8, just rook c8. And over. So, okay. Okay, now it's really over. Because now just d6, d7, d8. So b6. I don't. Oops. Yeah, I don't know why b6, but whatever. It doesn't really matter.
Check.
So d6, 7, queen.
Check.
Okay, so one final trick. One final trick is rook takes rook stalemate. Well, no, it's not. The king still has one legal move. Black thought he was setting a trick, but he wasn't.
Check.
And so now
Checkmate.
Okay. So that was a long time of analysis. Over 2 hours. But okay, what did we learn? Well, we learned that the player playing white missed some tactics, both in terms of losing a pawn and winning the game. That bishop takes d5 move. And he had some good plans, but that, you know, with some better preparation and a little bit more vision, he could have maximized his potential and his position. So it was a long labor, but hopefully you guys learned something from this, and hopefully you guys can do this yourselves on your own games. So if you guys are curious, I will actually paste the PGN in the chat, and you guys can analyze it yourselves if you like. Okay, so let me paste the PGN in the chat. Okay, so there's the PGN. So if you guys want the link for the game, it is there. So you guys can, you know, put your own chess engines on it and see how accurate what you were thinking during the game is, and what I was thinking during the game. Because like I said, I did not use a computer at all to look at this game. So some of the lines I might have been giving during the game might not have been 100% correct, but I mean, hopefully you guys can at least see some of the improvements that I suggested compared to what was played in the game. And this is what you should do for your games as well. It will really help. And again, it's a long process, but it's nothing that you don't already have. You know, you have a chessboard, you have a game of yours. All you have to do is just kind of go through it and see what you could have done differently. Now, you know, doing it for your games, you might say, oh, well, I play the perfect moves every game. But, you know, you kind of just look at alternatives and see what went wrong during the game and maybe how you could have avoided it. And by kind of asking yourself these questions, you might stumble upon better moves. And at the very end, once you've kind of done an exhaustive analysis, you can ask the computer and see, okay, well, how accurate was what I thought.